That uniform's a joke. Cut the act. My name is Commander Malik Sterling, United States Navy. Get your watch commander down here now. Turn around, hands behind your back. Don't force me to escalate. I'm not resisting. This detention is unlawful. You put cuffs on me, you're ending your career, and it's all being recorded.
He checked the time again and adjusted. Before we break down this career-ending disaster, take a quick second to check that subscribe button. If you believe our veterans deserve respect and that abuse of power should be called out, hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling me your state or country. I want to see how far this message is reaching, because this isn't just about one wrongful arrest. It's about a system that failed a man who served his country with honor. The cuff on his sleeve, making sure the gold stripe sat flat against the fabric. The dress whites were spotless. He had pressed them himself the night before in his hotel room, taking his time the way he always did before ceremonies. This wasn't a ceremony, but it mattered just as much. Malik Sterling stood near the arrival board at O'Hare, shoulders back, hands clasped loosely behind him. He wasn't there for a speech or a promotion. He was waiting for Flight 1402 from Charlotte. His mother was on it. She was turning 75, and she had told him years ago that her favorite sight in the world was seeing her son in uniform. So he wore the honors uniform for her. The jacket fit the way it always had, sharp through the shoulders, clean down the front. The rows of ribbons were aligned exactly the way regulations required. Silver Star, Navy Cross, Purple Heart. Each one represented something he didn't talk about much. The gold trident above them caught the overhead lights when he shifted slightly. He noticed a few people glance at it and look away. That was normal. He kept his posture steady but not rigid. 26 years in the Navy had trained that into him. Even standing still had a way of feeling like duty. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. A text from his sister. She just landed. He smiled to himself. His mother would be slow getting off the plane. She always took her time, careful with her steps. He pictured her walking down the jet bridge, looking around, searching for him the way she had when he graduated from BUD/S decades ago. He glanced at his reflection in a darkened window across the terminal. Everything was in order. Shoes polished. Cover tucked under his arm for now. No loose threads. No crooked ribbons. It wasn't vanity. It was respect. If he was going to represent the uniform in public, he was going to do it right. He thought about how many times she had seen him deploy. How many phone calls had started with, "I'm safe, Mom," even when he hadn't been. She never asked about the details. She just prayed and waited. Wearing the uniform today wasn't about medals. It was about letting her see something solid and certain. A few travelers slowed as they passed him. Some nodded quietly. A man in his 40s gave him a quick, awkward, "Thank you for your service." Malik returned a simple, "Thank you, sir," and kept his eyes on the arrival board. He never knew how to respond to that phrase. It always felt too large for a passing moment in an airport. He reached into his inner pocket and checked that his common access card was secure. It was habit. He carried it the same way he carried everything important, close, organized, ready. The card bore his name, his rank, and the embedded chip that linked him to systems most civilians would never see. It wasn't something he flashed around, but it was there if needed. A group of college kids stood off to his right, whispering. One of them pointed at his medals, counting them under his breath. Malik ignored it. He had long ago learned that the uniform draws attention, whether you want it to or not. He felt a small shift in the energy around him. Not fear, not tension exactly, just awareness. Years in combat had sharpened that sense. Someone was watching him closely. He didn't turn immediately. He let his eyes move naturally across the terminal. Near one of the security posts, an airport police officer stood still, looking directly at him. Dark blue uniform, nameplate glinting under the lights. The officer's stance wasn't casual. It was focused. Malik held the gaze for a second, then looked back at the arrival screen. He had done nothing wrong. He was simply waiting for his mother. He adjusted the bottom edge of his jacket once more. A small crease had formed near the pocket. He smoothed it out carefully. He imagined his mother stepping into the terminal, spotting him across the crowd. He wanted her first sight to be clean and proud, not rushed or careless. He thought about the first time he wore a Navy uniform home. He had been 22, thin from training, exhausted but determined. She had cried when she saw him then. Not because of the uniform itself, but because it meant he had survived something hard. This uniform meant he had survived a lot more. Another buzz from his phone. This time it was a photo from his sister, his mother sitting in her airplane seat, smiling into the camera, unaware of anything waiting outside that gate. He felt his throat tighten for a second. He slid the phone back into his pocket and straightened his shoulders. The officer was moving now. Malik saw him approach from the corner of his eye. Steady steps. Direct line. Not a casual walk-by. A confrontation walk. He inhaled slowly and let it out. He had dealt with tense situations before. He knew the importance of staying calm from the first word spoken. The officer stopped a few feet in front of him, close enough to make it clear this wasn't just a question about directions. "Excuse me," the officer said, voice firm. Malik turned fully to face him. He kept his expression neutral. Calm. Professional. "Yes, officer?" The officer's eyes traveled up and down the white jacket, over the ribbons, resting briefly on the trident. His jaw tightened slightly. "That your real uniform?" he asked. The question hung in the air. Malik didn't react outwardly. Inside, something shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just recognition. He had heard this tone before. "It is," Malik replied evenly. "Commander Malik Sterling, United States Navy. I'm waiting for my mother's flight." The officer didn't nod. Didn't smile. His gaze stayed hard. "Let's see some identification." Malik reached slowly toward his inner pocket, careful with the movement. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate either. "I'm going to retrieve my military ID," he said clearly. Left side. He felt the weight of the moment settle around them. People nearby had begun to notice. Conversations quieted just enough to create a bubble of attention. He pulled out the common access card and held it between two fingers, offering it forward. For a second, he thought about how simple this was supposed to be. A son waiting to surprise his mother. A uniform worn out of respect. A quiet reunion. Instead, he was standing in the middle of a public terminal, holding proof of his own identity to a man who looked at him like he didn't belong in it. He kept his voice steady. "There's no issue here, officer," he said. "I'm just here for my family." The officer took the card, and the situation shifted. "That's fake." Vance didn't even scan the card. He glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, then looked back up at Malik with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sir," Malik said evenly, "that's a Department of Defense Common Access card. You can run the number through dispatch." Vance shook his head like he'd heard it all before. "I've seen these online. Good copies. Real chip, fake data. You think I don't know about stolen valor?" A few people nearby slowed down. One man stopped walking completely. Malik kept his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it," he said. "Verify it." Vance stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "You've got a lot of hardware on that chest. Silver Star? Navy Cross? That's a heavy resume." "They're documented," Malik replied. "And public record." Vance's jaw tightened. Funny how the guys with the biggest stories are the ones standing around airports waiting for attention. Malik felt the shift clearly now. This wasn't about ID. It wasn't about airport policy. It was something Vance had already decided before he ever walked across the floor. "You think I'm here for attention?" Malik asked quietly. "I think you're wearing something you didn't earn," Vance shot back. "I've been watching these fraud videos all week. Guys just like you. Dress up, count on people being too polite to question it." Malik nodded once, slow. "You're basing this on YouTube?" "I'm basing it on instinct," Vance said. "And experience." Malik held his gaze. "How long have you been on this detail?" "Long enough." "That wasn't my question." Vance's face flushed slightly. 18 months. Malik let that sit there. "I've been in the Navy 26 years, he said. "If you think this uniform is fake, run it. Don't guess." The officer looked past him at the crowd starting to gather. Phones were up now. Not aggressively, just quietly recording. Vance seemed to notice it too. "You're not the first guy to try this," Vance said louder, as if speaking for the audience. "They all get defensive when you call them out." "I'm not defensive," Malik replied. "I'm asking you to do your job correctly." That landed harder than anything else. Vance's grip tightened around the ID card. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job. I'm asking you to verify facts before you accuse someone of a crime." The word crime hung there. "You're loitering," Vance said quickly. "Suspicious behavior." "I'm standing at arrivals," Malik said. "Waiting for flight 1402 from Charlotte." "You can check that too." Vance didn't move to his radio. He didn't check a screen. He just stared at Malik like he was trying to force a confession out of him by will alone. "You don't look like a SEAL," he said finally. There it was. Malik didn't react outwardly, but he felt the weight of it. "What does one look like?" he asked. Vance didn't answer. He just looked down at the medals again, then back at Malik's face. "I'm not buying it," he said. "Not without proof." "You're holding proof," Malik replied. And still, Vance refused to see it. "You don't look like a SEAL." Vance said it louder this time. Not just to Malik, to the people standing close enough to hear. A few heads turned fully now. Someone stopped mid-step. A phone lifted higher. Malik didn't blink. "What does a SEAL look like?" he asked. Vance gave a short laugh. "Not like this." "Like what?" Malik pressed, calm but firm. Vance gestured vaguely at the medals. "All that? Silver Star. Navy Cross. That's rare air. Guys who've done that don't stand around baggage claim posing." "I'm not posing," Malik said. "I'm waiting for my mother." The word mother seemed to irritate Vance more than calm him. "Convenient," he replied. "You pick a busy terminal, wear the full honors kit, count on nobody checking." Malik felt the shift from suspicion to performance. Vance wasn't investigating anymore. He was building a narrative out loud. "Officer," Malik said, keeping his tone steady, "you have my identification. If you believe it's fraudulent, run it through your system. That's standard procedure." "I don't need a computer to tell me what I can see," Vance shot back. "And what exactly do you see?" Malik asked. "I see someone wearing a uniform he didn't earn." The words landed hard. Not because they were loud, but because they were deliberate. A woman standing nearby spoke up quietly. "He looks official to me." Vance ignored her. "You think I haven't watched the videos?" he said to Malik. "Guys buy this stuff online. Order the ribbons, the trident, everything. They rehearse the lines." "I'm not rehearsing anything," Malik replied. "I gave you my name and rank. That information is verifiable." "Yeah, and I'm the president," Vance muttered. That pulled a few nervous laughs from the edge of the crowd. The tension thickened. It was no longer a private exchange. It was a public accusation. Malik straightened slightly, not aggressively, just instinctively. "You're accusing me of impersonating a commissioned officer," he said clearly. "That's a federal crime. If you believe that's what's happening, you need to follow procedure." "You don't get to instruct me," Vance snapped. "I'm reminding you," Malik said. Vance stepped closer, invading his space. "You know what gives you away?" Malik held his ground. "What?" "You're too calm." For a moment, neither man spoke. "I've been in situations where losing control gets people hurt," Malik said quietly. "Staying calm isn't a tell. It's training." Vance's face hardened. "Or it's practice." A young man off to the side said, "Man, just scan the card." Vance turned his head sharply. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns everyone if you're accusing him in public," the man replied. Now more phones were out. Malik could see the lenses. He knew what that meant. Every word, every move would live online within minutes. He lowered his voice slightly. "Officer, I'm asking you one more time. Verify the ID. If it's fake, I'll cooperate fully. And if I don't," Vance challenged, "then you're escalating something that doesn't need to be escalated." Vance stared at him for a long second. Then his hand dropped toward his belt. The crowd went quiet. Vance's hand closed around the grip of his taser and pulled it free. The bright yellow casing caught the overhead light. A few people gasped. Someone behind Malik said, "Are you serious?" Malik didn't move. He registered everything in a split second. Distance, about 7 feet. Angle, slightly off to his right. Vance's stance, unsteady, weight too far forward. Finger close to the trigger, but not fully set. He had trained for moments like this, just not in airports. In close quarters, a weapon could be redirected in under a second. Step inside the arc, control the wrist. Pivot. Disarm. End it before it began. His body knew the sequence without him thinking it through. Vance raised the taser higher. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "I am not resisting," Malik said clearly. He kept his hands visible at chest level. Open palms. "You're being detained," Vance snapped. "For what?" Malik asked. "Suspicion of impersonating a military officer." "You haven't verified that," Malik replied. "Turn around," Vance shouted. Malik could feel the tension ripple through the crowd. Phones were steady now, recording every second. He could almost see the headline forming if this went wrong. Airport cop forced to defend himself. Suspect lunges. Chaos. The story would shrink down to a few seconds of movement without context. He recalculated. If he disarmed Vance, even cleanly, he would still be the bigger man taking down a uniformed officer in public. No one watching from a distance would see the nuance. They would see force. He lowered his hands slightly but kept them open. "Officer, there is no threat here," he said. "You're escalating this unnecessarily." "Last warning," Vance replied, voice cracking just a little. Malik saw it then, not just anger, but fear. Vance was in too deep. He had committed to the idea that Malik was a fraud, and now backing down would look weak. Malik took a slow breath. He had faced gunfire in places most people couldn't find on a map. He had made decisions under far worse pressure. This wasn't about survival. It was about restraint. He turned his body slightly, not enough to provoke, just enough to signal compliance. I am complying, he said. I am not a threat to you. Vance stepped forward abruptly, closing the gap. Malik felt the movement coming before it happened. He could have shifted weight, redirected the momentum, controlled the fall. He chose not to. He let his arms stay loose. He let gravity do its work. Because sometimes winning the physical fight means losing everything else. And Malik wasn't willing to lose the truth, just to prove a point. Vance lunged before anyone could process what was happening. He drove his shoulder into Malik's upper body and hooked a leg behind his knee. It wasn't controlled. It was force for the sake of force. Malik felt the impact and let himself go with it. The floor came up fast. His chest hit first. The sound was heavy and flat, fabric and bone striking tile. The rows of metals between his sternum and the ground took the brunt of it. He felt the metal press hard into his ribs. One of the pins snapped loose under the weight. A woman in the crowd shouted, "He's not fighting." Phones tilted downward to follow the fall. Someone said, "Oh my God," under their breath. Malik kept his hands open. He did not brace to strike back. He did not twist to escape. He absorbed it. Vance landed on top of him, knee driving into his lower back. "Stop resisting," he yelled. "I am not resisting," Malik said into the floor. His voice was steady but muffled. "You're tensing up?" "I'm breathing," Malik replied. Vance grabbed his right arm and yanked it behind his back harder than necessary. Pain shot through Malik's shoulder. Years of training kept him from reacting physically. He knew that even a reflexive pull could be misread on camera. The second arm followed. Cold metal cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Click, click. The sound carried. Malik's cover had slid several feet away. A teenage boy picked it up awkwardly and held it, unsure what to do. No one moved to interfere. They just watched. Vance stood and pulled Malik up by the chain between the cuffs. It forced his shoulders back at an angle that made it difficult to straighten fully. The front of his white jacket was marked now, streaked where it hit the ground. One ribbon hung crooked. The trident was scratched. "Why are you doing this?" someone called out. "He showed you ID," another voice said. Vance ignored them. His breathing was heavy. Adrenaline made his movements sharp and uneven. Malik stood upright as best he could. He looked directly ahead, not at the officer, not at the crowd. He knew the cameras were still rolling. He knew this part would replay in slow motion later. "I have complied at every step," he said clearly. "You are making a mistake." "Save it," Vance replied, guiding him forward toward the security office. Malik caught one last glimpse of the arrivals board. Flight 1402. Landed. His mother would be walking into the terminal any minute. And instead of seeing her son standing tall in his honors uniform, she was about to see him in handcuffs. "What is going on here?" The voice came from inside the security office just as Vance pushed Malik through the door. Sergeant Ramirez stepped out from behind the desk. Late 50s. Short gray hair. Marine Corps tattoo barely visible under his sleeve. He took one look at Malik in cuffs and stopped walking. Vance answered quickly. "Stolen valor. Fake ID. Resisted." Malik stood straight despite the angle of the cuffs digging into his wrists. His jacket was streaked from the floor. One ribbon was hanging loose. He didn't speak. Ramirez didn't look at Vance first. He looked at the uniform. His eyes moved slowly, collar, shoulder boards, metal rack, trident. He stepped closer without saying a word. "Take the cuffs off," Ramirez said quietly. Vance blinked. "Sarge, he." "Take the cuffs off." There wasn't any volume behind it, just authority. Vance hesitated for half a second, then reached for the key. The metal clicked open. Malik brought his hands forward slowly, rubbing one wrist with the other. Ramirez faced him directly now. "Sir," he said, voice controlled, "may I see your ID?" Malik nodded and looked at Vance. "He has it." Vance handed the card over like it weighed more than it should. Ramirez didn't glance at it. He examined it, checked the hologram, turned it slightly under the light, scanned the embedded chip with the small reader on the desk. The system responded immediately. A verified profile filled the screen. Ramirez's jaw tightened. He looked back at Malik, then at the trident again. You active duty? Yes, Sergeant, Malik replied. Commander. 26 years. Ramirez gave a short nod. I can see that. He turned to Vance. Did you run this before you put hands on him? Vance shifted his weight. I didn't need to. I knew. You knew. Ramirez cut in. He didn't fit, Vance said. It looked wrong. Ramirez stepped closer to him. What exactly looked wrong? Vance didn't answer. Ramirez pointed at the medals. You know how those are mounted? You know the spacing regulations? You think someone guessing off the internet gets that perfect? Vance's face went pale. Ramirez looked back at Malik. Sir, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Malik kept it simple. He demanded ID. I provided it. He refused to verify it. He drew a taser. I complied. He tackled me. Ramirez exhaled slowly. He looked toward the small window facing the terminal. People were still gathered outside. You tackled a decorated commander in full honors uniform in front of civilians, Ramirez said to Vance, voice low. I thought he was faking it, Vance replied, weaker now. You thought, Ramirez said. You didn't check. He walked back to the desk and picked up the phone. Call the chief, he said to the officer beside him. Now, he paused, then added, and notify the Navy liaison. Vance finally seemed to understand the shift. Sarge, it's not that serious. Ramirez stared at him. It's already serious, he said. Malik adjusted the front of his jacket slowly, straightening what he could. One ribbon was bent. He didn't try to fix it yet. Outside, more phones were pointed toward the glass. Inside, the room felt smaller, and for the first time since the confrontation began, the weight of what had just happened started to settle in. They're on their way. Ramirez hung up the phone and looked straight at Vance. NCIS wants statements. DOJ has already been notified. Vance let out a short laugh, like it was a joke that hadn't landed. For what? It was a detainment. Ramirez didn't blink. You used force on an active-duty Navy commander in a federal facility without verifying credentials. It's not a parking dispute. Malik stood a few feet away, calm but pale under the overhead lights. He had fixed the bent ribbon as best he could. One medal was scratched. He noticed it but didn't comment. Within 20 minutes, 2 plainclothes agents walked in. They showed credentials, spoke quietly with Ramirez, then approached Malik first. Respectful. Direct. Commander Sterling? One of them asked. Yes. We're with NCIS. We need your account. Malik gave it in the same steady tone he'd used before. Timeline. Commands given. His compliance. The tackle. The crowd. No embellishment. No anger. The agents wrote everything down. Then they turned to Vance. Officer, we'll need your body cam footage. Vance hesitated again. It's uploading. We'll wait, the agent replied. A third official arrived shortly after. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. She didn't waste time with introductions beyond a name and title. She asked Ramirez for the incident report. She asked Vance why he didn't run the ID before escalating. I believed it was fraudulent, Vance said. Based on what? She asked. He struggled to answer without repeating himself. It didn't look right. She held his gaze. Not looking right is not probable cause. The room stayed quiet after that. An airport operations manager stepped in next, visibly tense. He spoke to Ramirez in a low voice. Then he faced Vance. Turn in your badge. Vance stared at him. You can't be serious. This is administrative leave pending investigation, the manager said. Effective immediately. For a second, Vance didn't move. Then he unclipped the badge from his chest and placed it on the desk. The sound it made was small but final. Outside, word had already spread. The video was online before anyone in that room finished their statements. Different angles. Clear audio. The tackle. The accusation. The moment Ramirez said, "Take the cuffs off." Phones kept buzzing. One of the NCIS agents stepped aside to answer a call. When he returned, his expression had changed. The Pentagon is aware, he said quietly to Ramirez. Malik finally spoke again. Sergeant, I have a ceremony to attend tomorrow. Ramirez nodded once. Understood, sir. There was nothing dramatic about what happened next. No shouting. No handcuffs reversed. Just paperwork, quiet conversations, and the slow realization that a decision made in seconds was now a federal matter. Vance stood off to the side without his badge, watching agents collect footage that would be reviewed frame by frame. Cause and effect. Action and consequence. By the time Malik walked out of that office, NCIS had the footage, DOJ had opened a file, and Vance no longer had authority on his chest. The shockwave had already started moving outward. The indictment hit like a storm. Papers landed on desks, emails pinged with urgent notices, and suddenly everyone who had been looking the other way couldn't anymore. Sheriff Brody Miller sat in his office, staring at the charges like they were a different language, but the words were simple enough: corruption, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. The people he had controlled, intimidated, and manipulated were now watching him unravel. Inside the precinct, officers whispered behind closed doors. Some tried to justify their silence, others were quietly relieved. The evidence was overwhelming: recordings, documents, eyewitness testimonies. Nothing could be twisted away. The local news ran non-stop coverage, each story adding pressure, making it clear that the sheriff's influence was cracking. At the trial, the courtroom was packed. Survivors, victims, former colleagues, everyone who had once been afraid to speak now had a voice. Brody's defense faltered under the weight of factual proof. Witness after witness recounted years of intimidation, illegal raids, and manipulated investigations. The pattern was undeniable, the misconduct undeniable. The jury didn't hesitate. Conviction came swiftly. Brody Miller's face was stoic, but in the quiet moments of the courtroom, the tension was palpable. He had underestimated the persistence of those he thought were powerless. The gavel hit, and the sound echoed like finality, a punctuation mark on years of systemic abuse. News spread fast. The department felt the ripple effects immediately. Internal reviews were launched. Officers who had enabled or ignored misconduct faced scrutiny. Policies were rewritten, training overhauled, oversight increased. The culture that had tolerated Brody's actions could no longer hide behind tradition or fear. The ripple was more than professional, it was personal. Careers were ended, reputations shattered, and the town finally began to breathe. Brody Miller was escorted out, not as the untouchable sheriff he had imagined, but as a man confronted by the consequences of his own choices. The law had caught up, not just to punish, but to make clear that authority comes with accountability. For those left behind in the department, the reckoning wasn't just about him. It was about facing the truth of what they had allowed, and deciding whether they would continue patterns of silence or commit to a new standard. Outside, the streets were quiet but charged. The community watched, some with relief, others with cautious hope. The story was no longer about one man's power. It was about the system finally bending toward justice, however slowly, and the knowledge that no one, no matter how untouchable, was above the law. The chapter closed with the courthouse steps emptying, cameras flashing, and a town realizing that reckoning, conviction, and fallout were messy, painful, and necessary, and that silence had finally lost its grip. The promotion announcement hit the department like a shockwave. Captain Vance's name was no longer in any official records, his career scrubbed clean from internal rosters. People whispered in hallways, some in disbelief, others relieved. Vance had built his reputation on fear and favoritism, but the fallout from Brody Miller's conviction left no room for half measures. Leadership decided that cleaning house meant erasing the fingerprints of anyone who had sustained the old culture, and Vance was at the top of that list. At the press conference, the new leadership spoke plainly. Donations were pledged to community programs, scholarships for law students, and support for victims of police misconduct. It wasn't just about appearances, it was an attempt to rebuild trust. Every word underscored a commitment to reform, to proving that the department could be a force for accountability, not intimidation. People outside the department noticed. Local news outlets covered the story with careful attention, highlighting the shift from old power structures to a more transparent system. Inside the department, officers adjusted to the changes unevenly. Some embraced the new policies, attending workshops on bias, reporting procedures, and community engagement. Others resisted quietly, resentful that loyalty to the old guard had become a liability. But the message was clear: the old ways no longer protected anyone. Vance's erasure was proof that misconduct, even behind a badge, had consequences. Community leaders were invited to advisory panels, giving them a voice in policies that affected their neighborhoods directly. Programs focused on youth outreach, mental health, and civic education were launched. Donations from private citizens and foundations supplemented funding, signaling that reform wasn't just symbolic, it had resources and backing. Every initiative carried the weight of accountability, a counterbalance to the years of neglect and abuse. Vance disappeared from public view, but his absence was felt. Colleagues who had once deferred to him noticed the shift in office dynamics immediately. Decisions became collaborative, and oversight increased at every level. The department wasn't perfect, but the culture of fear was being replaced by one of responsibility. The message was reinforced every time a policy was implemented or a community program reported success. By the end of the year, the department looked fundamentally different. The legacy of Brody Miller's reign and Vance's complicity had been rewritten not just in personnel records, but in the lived reality of officers and residents alike. Trust, once fractured, began to mend slowly through visible action and measurable reform. And while Vance's name faded from memory, the reforms he resisted became the defining story of the department's next chapter, a story of accountability, civic responsibility, and the long work of rebuilding what had been broken. The department had learned a lesson in permanence. Reputations could be erased, but meaningful change, backed by community and transparency, left a mark no one could undo.
Thank you for watching this video. Hit the subscribe button, like, and comment to get more videos that deserves justice.